Part 1. Our movie starts with a man named Lee sitting in prison, carefully drawing a counterfeit postage stamp. While he's working, a prison guard brings him his meal. At the same moment, the guard notices that the inmate in the cell across from Lee is seriously ill, so he rushes away to call the other guards. Seizing the opportunity, Lee quickly slips the letter he's holding into the guard's mailbag before anyone can notice. A few moments later, the guards escort Lee to an interrogation room packed with high-ranking officers waiting for him. They accuse him of being involved in the murder of 7 guards, transporting a central bank truck in Washington after it was ambushed by a criminal gang. Then they add 2 more murder charges against him, one at a printing factory and another involving the murder of a famous art producer inside a hotel. The investigators explain that all of these crimes were organized by an international counterfeiting organization. They tell Lee that every member of the gang has been killed except for 2 people, Lee himself and the mysterious gang leader known only as the Painter. They also reveal that no intelligence agency in the world has ever discovered the Painter's true identity. The lead investigator shows Lee the only photo they have of the Painter, but it's so blurry that it reveals nothing. Terrified, Lee stays completely silent. She keeps pressing him, asking who the Painter really is and explaining that he never leaves behind a single clue. However, Lee insists he doesn't know him. The investigator warns him that if the Painter finds out Lee is cooperating with the police, no one inside that building will survive. Lee suddenly breaks down in tears, convinced they're all going to die. But none of the officers believe him. They drag him back to his cell, and the moment he walks inside, one of the officers punches him so hard that he falls to the ground and loses consciousness. The next morning, several officers enter Lee's cell. They collect his fingerprints and DNA samples before taking him back to the interrogation room once again. This time, they tell him that his fingerprints were found at the hotel crime scene, making him the prime suspect in that murder as well. Lee completely loses his temper, insisting they're trying to frame him for a crime he never committed. But the investigator confidently tells him that the evidence against him is impossible to fake. She explains that lying won't help because, either way, he's already a dead man. She then offers him a deal. If he helps them identify the Painter, they'll hide him somewhere no one will ever be able to find him. Meanwhile, the investigator and her superior head to a meeting room filled with officers. Sitting quietly inside is a famous artist named Ewan, wearing a pair of dark sunglasses. The officers explain that she's also Lee's longtime girlfriend. Since Lee is the only witness connected to several murders, they can't simply. The investigator sits down with Ewan and reminds her that they met years ago on the day her fiancé died, and that she was the one who took her to the hospital. Ewan tells them she's determined to get Lee released. She even warns them that if they can't find a legal solution, she'll handle things her own way. Ignoring her threat, the officers give her one condition: convince Lee to reveal the Painter's identity, and they'll let him walk free. Soon afterward, Lee is brought into the room. The moment he sees Ewan, he's completely shocked. She explains that the investigators promised to release him if he tells them who the Painter really is. Lee quietly reminds her that she already knows what will happen if he talks. If he reveals the Painter, every single one of them will end up dead. Reminds everyone that Lee isn't just a witness, he's also one of the main suspects in several of those crimes. Let him go. However, the investigators boss Part 2. Frustrated and heartbroken, Ewan walks away. Lee stops her before she leaves and asks why she's suddenly pushing him to talk. She finally admits that she wants justice for the man she loved, the man the Painter murdered. After thinking for a moment, Lee decides to tell the investigators everything from the beginning. He explains that he first met Ewan back in 1985. At the time, they were both struggling artists trying to make a name for themselves. Day after day, they searched for someone willing to support them or buy their paintings, but no one showed any interest. Months went by without selling a single piece, and things became so difficult that they couldn't even pay their utility bills. Eventually, both the electricity and gas were cut off. One day, during that difficult period, a mysterious man visited Lee and handed him a famous painting called The Four Seasons. The man asked him to create a perfect copy of it. Later that day, Lee returned home and overheard Ewan talking to an art collector inside their apartment. She was showing him her paintings and asking if he could support Lee's artwork as well. Unfortunately, the collector explained that he could only invest in one artist, not both of them. Hearing that conversation deeply hurt Lee. That night, after the collector left, Lee told Ewan he didn't like the fact that she had tried to convince the man to buy his paintings. Ewan calmly replied that she wasn't begging anyone, she had only been giving the collector a suggestion. Trying to make her feel better, Lee smiled and lied, claiming that he had sold every one of his paintings at an exhibition earlier that morning. Although he looked disappointed deep down, Ewan was genuinely happy for him. Lee then encouraged her to accept the collector's offer instead of worrying about him, hoping she'd have the successful career she deserved. Sometime later, Lee was working alone in his studio, surrounded by dozens of unfinished paintings. Suddenly, Ewan walked in carrying. Realizing he couldn't hide the truth anymore, Lee admitted that he didn't believe he was a truly talented artist. Ewan immediately disagreed, insisting he was incredibly gifted and that his painting style was unique. But Lee sadly confessed that the only thing he was truly exceptional at was copying other people's artwork with absolute perfection. Back in the interrogation room, the investigator interrupts his story and tells him to stop talking about his personal life and focus on the painter instead. Lee continues. He explains that one day he attended one of Ewan's art exhibitions. He was standing by himself, feeling depressed, when Ewan walked over to him. Lee asked about a particular painting, and she happily told him that it had already received several purchase offers. Looking around the gallery, Lee noticed that every single painting had sold except that one. Bitterly, he hinted that the only reason it remained unsold was because it was actually his work. Ewan tried to calm him down, but before she could say anything else, they noticed a man openly mocking the painting in front of the guests. Without hesitating, Ewan grabbed a glass of water, threw it in the man's face, and kicked him out of the exhibition. The man quickly got into his car and drove away, but Lee chased after him to apologize for Ewan's behavior. To Lee's surprise, the stranger smiled and explained that he wasn't interested in Ewan at all. He had come because of Lee's painting. The two of them sat down together at a nearby cafe where the stranger praised Lee's incredible talent for reproducing famous artwork. He told Lee he had never seen anyone capable of creating such flawless copies. Then he offered him a job making replicas of valuable paintings. Before leaving, the man handed Lee his business card and told him to call if he decided to accept the offer. When Lee returned to the gallery, Ewan was furious after learning that he was actually considering working in the counterfeit art business. Without saying a single word, Lee walked over to his own painting, pulled a lighter out of his pocket, set the canvas on fire in front of everyone, and quietly walked away. She told him she had visited the gallery where he claimed he'd sold all his paintings. That's when she discovered he had lied to her. One of his canvases. The moment he saw her expression, he knew something was wrong. Part 3. The next morning, Lee met the mysterious man inside his car and told him he had accepted the offer. The man smiled, reached into his pocket, pulled out a $100 bill, and handed it to Lee. He then asked Lee to make a perfect copy of it. Lee froze in shock. He had no idea the job involved counterfeiting money. Furious, he stepped out of the car and refused to take part in such a crime. The man followed him and calmly explained that his family had been in the counterfeiting business for generations. He claimed no one had ever managed to catch them because they followed strict rules and only worked with powerful clients who would never betray them. He promised Lee complete protection and assured him that he could ask for any guarantee he wanted. Even after hearing all of that, Lee still refused. The stranger kept insisting that Lee had nothing left to lose. But eventually he stopped arguing and let him walk away. Sometime later, the mysterious man boarded a flight to Hong Kong. Just as the plane was about to take off, Lee unexpectedly walked in and sat beside him. The man looked surprised and admitted he never thought Lee would actually show up. Lee explained that Ewan had left for America, and he wanted to earn enough money to reunite with her. The stranger promised that once their mission was complete, he'd help Lee get back to her. He then advised Lee to forget about love for now and focus on building his future. After that, the stranger finally introduced himself. He was the man everyone feared, the painter. During the flight, the painter handed Lee the new version of the $100 bill, explaining that the U.S. government had redesigned it with advanced security features to make counterfeiting much more difficult. Lee carefully examined every tiny detail under a special light, studying the colors, textures, hidden patterns, and security marks. The painter then introduced Lee to the rest of the passengers. To Lee's surprise, every single one of them was a member of the organization. Lee asked them to prepare the special paper, inks, and tools he needed, while the painter reminded him to pay close attention to the bill's invisible watermark. Once they landed in Hong Kong, everything had already been prepared. A secret workshop was waiting for them. Lee immediately locked himself inside and got to work. Days turned into weeks as he spent countless hours studying every microscopic detail of the bill. Finally, he succeeded. Lee created a counterfeit $100 bill that looked absolutely identical to the original. The painter couldn't hide his excitement. He took the bill and brought it to another group of specialists. Their job wasn't to recreate the artwork, it was to duplicate the hidden security watermark inside the bill. Everyone worked around the clock, combining their skills to produce a counterfeit note that was indistinguishable from genuine U.S. currency. After the work was completed, one of the senior members, Yam, carefully inspected the finished bill and confirmed that everything was perfect. Later, Lee sat down with Yam and asked him how long he'd known the painter. Yam explained that he had worked with the painter for many years and had even worked for the painter's father before him. Still feeling uneasy, Lee admitted he was worried about getting caught someday. Yam smiled confidently and reassured him that the painter's family had survived for generations because they followed one simple rule. Their clients never revealed their identities. He also explained that the painter lived by a strict code, and as long as everyone respected those rules, they would remain untouchable. Then Yam shared a story from the past. He said the painter's father had once gotten into a dispute with a group in the Netherlands over money. Instead of following the rules, greed took over, and that mistake cost him his life. Yam looked at Lee and warned him never to break the painter's rules if he wanted to stay alive. Before Lee could respond, the painter walked into the room. He told everyone to get ready. Their next destination, Europe, Lee continues his confession, explaining that after the gang successfully produced nearly perfect counterfeit money, the painter expanded his operation and started distributing the fake bills through trusted clients across different countries. One day, Lee returned to the factory and found the painter inspecting the latest batch of counterfeit cash, still haunted by the armored truck robbery. Lee asked him what would happen after they ran out of the stolen security ink. He wanted to know if the gang planned to kill more innocent people just to steal another shipment. The painter looked annoyed by the question. He insisted that he never intended to kill the guards during the robbery. According to him, everything happened in self-defense while protecting his men. Then he promised Lee that he would find another way to obtain the special ink, meaning they would never have to repeat such a bloody robbery again. Lee finally believed that this would be his last job. The painter then gathered all of the workers and informed them that the factory would shut down the following week. After that, he personally traveled across several cities, delivering the counterfeit money to his buyers. A short time later, Lee approached the painter with good news. He had discovered that a car manufacturer used an industrial ink almost identical to the one needed for the counterfeit bills. If they could obtain that ink, they would never have to rob another armored truck again. The painter was genuinely impressed. As a reward, he handed Lee the keys to a luxury resort that had been purchased under Lee's name. Lee was shocked by such an expensive gift. Not long afterward, the painter and Lee traveled to meet one of the organization's biggest clients at a remote camp. Before entering the building, the painter quietly handed Lee a small remote control. Confused, Lee slipped it into his pocket without asking any questions. Moments later, while the painter negotiated with the client, Lee suddenly heard several gunshots outside. He pretended not to notice and stayed where he was. Inside, the client admired the flawless counterfeit money and praised its incredible quality. Then the painter calmly reminded the man of something that had happened 7 years earlier. He revealed that the client had hired a Russian gang to murder the painter's father. The client instantly realized this meeting had never been about business. It was revenge. The painter slowly opened his jacket, revealing several explosives strapped to his body. The client's guards immediately drew their guns and aimed them directly at his head. Without losing his composure, the painter shouted at Lee and ordered him to throw away the remote control he had been given earlier. The moment Lee tossed it aside, a massive explosion ripped through the building. Chaos erupted everywhere. Everyone pulled out their weapons and opened fire. Bullets flew in every direction as people desperately fought for survival. Suddenly, someone outside fired a rocket launcher directly at the camp. The explosion destroyed part of the compound. Lee grabbed a rifle and started shooting back while trying to stay alive. Just then, an armored vehicle crashed through the battlefield, spraying bullets across the entire area. Another vehicle arrived only seconds later. Inside was a badly burned woman named Ching, whose clothes were still on fire. Without thinking twice, Lee ran toward her, extinguished the flames with his hands, picked her up, and carried her to safety. Meanwhile, the painter and his men continued exchanging heavy gunfire with the remaining enemies until they finally escaped. The gang loaded everyone into a pickup truck, including Ching, and fled the scene before reinforcements could arrive. Back in the interrogation room, Lee tells the investigators that after this incident, the organization stopped producing counterfeit money for nearly a year. During that time, Ching underwent several surgeries to repair the severe burns on her face. Lee, the painter, and Ching frequently visited the hospital together. As her condition gradually improved, the painter gave Ching a new passport under a different identity, allowing her to start a completely new life. Not long afterward, Lee visited Yuan's art gallery. To his surprise, he found Ching there. She quietly admitted that she finally understood why Lee had always kept his distance from her. She knew he wasn't seeing her. He was seeing Yuan because after the surgeries, Ching's face had become remarkably similar to the woman he truly loved.